recording the interview of Tamara O'Donnell. This interview is being conducted by Ericka Carter from the Wright State University's Veterans Project. This interview is being recorded at Wright State University in the Veteran and Military Center. It is 2:36 p.m. on August 20th, 2018. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming down. We'll get started. Where and when were you born?
I was born on March 16, 1974 in St. John's, Michigan.
Who were your parents and what were their occupations?
So my biological mother was Jeannie Lee Barrett, and she passed away when I was 4 in a car accident. My father is Alfred Clare Dickinson, and he worked at GM, a factory worker, for our whole life. When my mom died, he was 30 with 4 kids under the age of 10. So.
Wow. Okay. So you said you had 4 siblings?
Three
siblings?
3, yeah.
What, like brothers and sisters,
Mm-hmm.
and did they serve?
No, I'm the only one out of us that served.
Okay. What were you doing before you entered the service?
High school. I joined right out of high school. I did not have a good upbringing. Like I said, my mom died when I was really young, and my father had a rough time, and he had a hard time keeping us together. It was at a time when everybody else basically said, you need to give him up. And so by 15, I was out of the house, and basically I had 2 jobs and was going to school. So the military was my saving grace and my lifeline.
That's great. That's great that was an outlet for you. When you were in high school, did you have any hobbies, or it was just stay alive, huh?
No, I was actually, I was really blessed. I'm very blessed academically and stuff. I was on yearbook and everything, and I worked too. So, but yeah.
Okay. Which branch of the military did you serve in?
Air Force.
Were you active duty, National Guard, or Reserve?
I was active duty.
Okay. Why did you choose the Air Force?
Actually, that's a funny story because I never intended to join the military at all. I'm the baby of the family, but my youngest brother of the 2, he's a year older than me. He walked on at Western Michigan to play football, and my parents signed student loans for him. And then he had a situation where he got drunk one night, and he basically ended up severing his leg and lost a whole bunch of blood. Couldn't play football anymore, and when he couldn't play football, he decided he wasn't going to go to college anymore. He walked away from his student loans. I wanted to go to school. That was my thing. Academically, I knew I needed to get out of where I was, and that college and education was going to be the way to do it. My parents told me they weren't going to sign anything. They made too much money for me to get any grants. And one day, a friend of mine came back on a recruiter's assistance visit, and I was walking through the high school, and the recruiter looked at me and said, "Have you thought about the service?" And I started laughing, and I said, "Have you looked at me? I'm a press. I am not a military girl." And he said, "Oh, it's okay. It's the Air Force. We don't do PT. We don't do any of that stuff. We're the technical service." And I was like, "Okay, I'll talk to you, whatever." I figured I'd do 4 and get out. I went down to basic, fell in love.
Okay.
24 years later,
Where was basic?
Lackland Air Force Base, Texas.
Is there anything specific you remember about basic training? I mean, you fell in love, so it had to be something special about it. Any instructors or?
Probably the one I came in at the tail end of Desert Storm, Desert Shield. And so one of the big things that they did was about halfway through, you get to graduate from wearing greens into going into blues. And when you do that, they take you into an auditorium-like room, and they give you this big spiel about military bearing and, you know, how you need to keep your emotions in check and you need to do this and you need to do that. And then you remember the Lee Greenwood remix at the time of God Bless America, how they had mixed in like messages from vets' family or military members' families, messages to them, and everything, talking about just, they were just touching passages, but they were mixed into the song itself. Mm-hmm. Well, they played that. What they did was they shut off the lights. They left us in there, they shut off the lights, they played God Bless America, the remix, and then they played the national anthem. And then they walked back in and they flipped on the lights and they said, "Okay, challenge any of you to keep your military bearing." And of course everybody, every female in there was crying. You know, we were all, and we were all crying. And I knew
That this was for you. Mm-hmm. Did anyone attend your graduation?
My husband at the time came down. Let's say I think his mother was there.
Okay, I might have missed a step. You were married out of high school?
I was.
Okay. All right. Congratulations.
Mm.
You were very mature, so marriage would be the next likely step, right? I got a job, I got good at my education. Let's get married. All right. Did you have any children from that?
No.
No. Okay. All right. So AIT, or you guys call it your tech school?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Air Force calls it. What tech school did you go to?
I got lucky. One of the things when I talked to the recruiter is I told him, I said, you know, all I want is after 4 years, I want you to make sure that I've got more education than when I came in. I tested really well on the ASVAB. I did everything that they tell you not to do. So I went open general. I trusted the recruiter. I mean, everything that, as a personnel, because I'm a personnelist, everything that a personnelist would tell you, don't do that because you're going to get taken advantage of. I did all those. And yet the Air Force took care of me, and she's taken care of me through 24 years. I got lucky. I got into medical lab. I ended up at Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls.
Is this for AIT, or is this for job training, or is this your first duty station? That
was for job training.
Okay.
So that was my first, what we call phase 2, which is our tech school. I want to say it was 4 months. And then from there I came up here to Wright-Patterson and that was my phase 1. Phase 2 I did here at Wright-Patterson. Basically, the medical lab program is almost a year-long program anyways, because they have to take you basically through your associate's degree and all of the practicals and everything so that you can work in the lab. So by the time I graduated, I had my 5 level. I was really lucky. I had great mentors. And I came in at a really weird time in the military when the enlisted force was divided on whether they wanted prior enlisted to cross and become officers or whether they wanted to push them up the enlisted rank. And so I had 3 senior NCOs pull me into a room and say, "You're going to be an officer."
Did they give you an option?
And
you were okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things. It was obvious that it was in my best interest, and it came from a good place, and it was genuine. You know, they told me that they saw potential in me, and they wanted they wanted more enlisted on the officer side that could understand what the enlisted had dealt with, were dealing with, so that they could have compassion for the enlisted.
How old were you when this happened?
19.
Okay, and you had been enlisted for 1.5 years at this point?
Not even.
Okay, so what was your rank? E?
Well, I got to Wright Pat. I was a slick sleeve. I joined the military as an E1.
Uh-huh.
I got to Wright Pat literally as an E1. Probably by the time that happened, maybe I was an E3.
Okay, so E3, we're looking at officer. Whoa.
Yeah, it took me time. I mean, they basically mentored me through. You're gonna go at night and you're gonna take classes, which they had to sign some paperwork so that I could do that. And then I took Dante's and stuff so that I could get my gen ed out of the way. But, you know.
For us lay people, what's a Dante?
So it's the equivalency test.
Okay.
So that you can, instead of going and sitting in a classroom,
Mm-hmm.
you can just test out of a college class.
Okay.
So, CLEPS.
All right, so we're enlisted. We're going to work every day. We are doing school at night.
Mm-hmm.
When do we become an officer?
Oh, it took me a long time. I actually, I had 2 children in between there, 2 girls. And I actually ran into a female officer, a lieutenant, who downgraded my EPR.
An EPR
from afar. Enlisted performance report.
Okay.
So I was a Firewall 5 throughout my career.
Which is great, I assume.
Yes,
Okay.
That's the highest you can get. And this female actually even wrote me letters of a recommendation and everything leading up to, I can't remember what it was that I was put in for. And then I got pregnant, and I had problems, complications with that put me on bed rest. And then I got nominated for officer training school.
While you were on bed rest?
No, when I came back.
Okay.
And so I went to her thinking, here's a female officer who has mentored me and helped me all this time. Well, she had a child at the same time, and she had decided that she was going to get out. Unbeknownst to me, she had the belief that females shouldn't be active after having children. And so she gave me a 4, which it's not a bad EPR, so you can't fight it. But it's not good. So obviously when you go to compete for officer training school, it's the cream of the crop. So it was enough to prevent me from getting selected for a year. So when I went to my commander and had my interview, he said, I'm not going to put you through this year. He said, what I want to do is I want you to hold for a year. We're going to get a 5 on top. And then we are going to put in a letter and explain why she did this. Because I had a letter, an actual letter of recommendation from her at the same time that said that I walked on water. And they did an investigation in the silliness, and it really come down to personal opinion that she didn't believe that women should continue to serve after they had children.
When did she get out? Do you know? Was it shortly after that?
Literally within a month of the whole situation. She gave birth and got out. So
I'm sorry you had to go through that.
it's okay. You know, my belief is really, because I'm a big believer that there's a higher power. And they say, you know, when you put in your officer training package, you know, you're never going to get picked up the first time around. You're never going to get this. You're never going to get that. When my package went in, I got selected first board. I got exactly what I wanted. I got personnel. I got, so in the long run, I think that it was a higher power, because by waiting, it was a blessing. You know, I got put on the right board at the right time to get selected. I got things lined up, and my package got stronger, and I got time to get more physically fit, because I was coming off of a pregnancy at that time, so I got time to get back into shape, and it was a blessing. And I learned things as a leader. I learned things about, you know, sometimes we forget. One of the things that was said to me at that time was, well, you're too good of a technician, because I was basically backfilling a GS-13 position for them.
Wow.
As an airman. And so they were just not hiring it, because I was doing the job for them. And I learned early that good leaders mentor and move on. You know, and you push people forward. You know, that's what good leaders do. So, it was a blessing. It really was.
Okay. What rank were you now? Were you still at E3, or were you?
I was an E4.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. E4, we're going to officer school. Where was officer school?
I went down to Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama.
Oh my.
Yeah.
How was that?
It was interesting. You get stripped down again, and you have to be prepared for that. But it's different too, you know. But it was good. I mean, I got lucky again. I got lucky because I went in October, so it wasn't a bad time to go, because, you know, it wasn't
Terribly hot.
Yeah. I went, it was funny, because I remember I went during the monsoon season, and so when I went, it was literally a monsoon, and it was pouring rain. So, I remember doing the red line, and because what they do is they make you stand at this line, and they whisper in your ear to try to break your confidence, and then there's things you have to say, and they tell you them, and they're really simple things to say, but you're so nervous and anxious, and And then you have these people saying, just say this. If you just say this, then you can go and everything will be fine. And you stand there forever because it's like they're whispering in your ear and you can't say it. You can't get it out of your head.
So they're whispering and not yelling? This is different than than basic for enlisted. Because they do a lot of yelling. No one whispered at me ever.
Oh, the guy in front of you yells at you.
Oh, okay.
The guy in front of you yells at you. But he's on the other side of the line and can't come. He can't like get in your face. But the ones here are like, all you got to do is say this. If you just say this, just say it. Why can't you say it?
That's a lot.
You know, and so it's the psychology. I mean, that's what OT, officer training school is all about, is the psychology behind getting your head, getting around your head.
How long was officer training school?
12 weeks.
Okay, 12 weeks. So, did you cry at this graduation?
It was hard because actually, it was longer than that in reality, because I did go down in October, and I came home because we got a holiday break. So I got to come home for Christmas, and I came home to 2 baby girls. And when I came home, my youngest wanted nothing to do with me. And I remember going back and thinking, and we only had like 2 weeks left, and I almost gave up. I was the only female prior, and I remember thinking, this isn't worth it. My kids hate me right now, and I can't do this. And I was very fortunate. Out of 13 people, we had 7 priors, and there were 2 guys in my flight that walked in the room, and they looked at me and they said, you will not give up. You will not. We finished together. And they will be there when you get home. They're babies, and you will survive this. And yeah.
I can relate very well. When I went to Iraq and came back, same feeling. My daughter didn't know who I was, and it's heartbreaking. It is very heartbreaking. So I understand on a 100% level where that feeling might have come from. And it's great you weren't at war or anything at this point. You had an end date in mind. So congratulations for just having a wonderful support team with you.
Thank you.
All right, so we made it.
We made it. Yep.
What happens next? Do we return to Wright Pat?
No, that's in the Air Force. That's catch 22, 21, whatever. When you go from enlisted to officer, that's one of our mandates. You cannot go to the base that you came from, for obvious reasons. Fraternization and all of that. It's just, so I go from Wright Pat, I go out to Hill Air Force Base in Utah, and go from medical to a fighter wing. Very different dynamics. I remember being at lodging and stepping out the door and the F-16 going off and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm in the Air Force. Okay, I'm in the Air Force.
After officer training school, was there more job training that you had to do? Were you still in the same job?
No, I changed jobs completely. I went from medical, I was in personnel now. I transferred completely over.
And did you have to go to another school?
Not right away. They sent me, they actually sent me right to Utah. I went out and I was a section commander for a little bit. And then I went out And then they sent me back. Well, no, wait a minute. No, actually, I did go to BPOP, Basic Personnel School after. Because I did take leave. Now that I think about it, I did take leave and come home for, I think it was like a week, maybe 2 weeks. And then I went down to I want to say Biloxi, Mississippi. I did, yes. Went to Biloxi. And it was probably, I think it was only like 2 months. So.
Okay.
It was, the thing about personnel is, one, we're always transitioning so much stuff. So a lot of it you just have to learn on the fly anyways. And especially at that time in the Air Force, we were literally transitioning systems. And so everything that they were teaching us and they were saying, but you're not going to do this when you get to your duty station. And it was like, okay, so are you going to teach us what we're doing? So, but the cool thing about it was we got to know other personnel officers, which I think 90% of the training that we do, whether it's enlisted, whether it's officer, it doesn't matter. 90% of what we do as military, it's about networking. You know.
In the Air Force.
You don't think in the other services too?
Do you? Okay.
I do. Because I did joint. I mean, I was joint for a couple assignments. And, I mean, you got to know your job. But I can learn anything. Anywhere I go, I can learn anything. But if I can collaborate with a team, then I can learn my job 10 times faster. And if I collaborate with a team, they're going to help me learn the job. If I'm an island, they have no reason to help. And I think that's what makes us different. Is like, when I retired, going out in the civilian world, they're different people. They're different people, and it's one of those where they don't have the desire to collaborate as much as we do. You know, we just got done, I was telling you, I'm transitioning into a new job. It's to come home. You know, I'm taking a pay cut, relatively speaking. I mean, I have my retirement, so I don't really worry about pay, but I'm going to a job that I did probably 15 years ago, but it's because I get to come home. I'm going to go back into a military unit where I'm surrounded by military people. I'm okay with that. I don't really care what the pay is anymore.
That's good.
So
That you're going to feel more comfortable where you are. Transitioning can be difficult, to say the least. So you go to Hill Air Force Base. You got a new job, new command. You're running things. What happens next?
Let's see. Well, it was interesting. I quickly got the name Pitbull. Because there's a lot of stuff that just went undone. And so...
From previous commands?
Section commander.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the Air Force, I don't know how familiar you are with it. You've got a commander, and then basically you have... At the time, I was an adjutant, what we call an adjutant. So it's in a fighter squadron, it's the commander's lieutenant who has command authority, and so they can do discipline, and they can do some of the things so that the commander doesn't get overloaded. So specifically, like with the junior enlisted, and they can work with the first sergeant to just kind of take some of that stuff, and then they can also they take care of a lot of the administrative evaluations and stuff like that, just so that the commander doesn't have to worry about it at their level. But some of the things, I mean, some of the stuff was silly stuff where the female before me, I laughed because people said I was really good at my job. And it's not that I don't think I was really good at my job. My argument is I got lucky and I came behind people who were not necessarily doing their job always. And so, like, this individual, she wanted to be a medic. Not a medic, she wanted to be a doctor. She didn't like being a personalist. And so she really didn't do her job. And so I remember one night I was working and one of the pilots looked at me and said, "It's 4:30, why are you here?" And I started laughing. I said, "Because I have a job to do." And he said, "But it's 4:30. And I said, "And I still have a job to do." He said, "Oh, okay." And I turned around, walked away, and did my job. So I did that for a while, and we were the first unit to deploy under the AEF construct. That was the Air Expeditionary Force construct. So it was we were the first wing. It was when the Air Force changed how we deployed, and we all deployed as a group, which I know, like, the Army does that all the time. We don't. We go in pieces and parts and we've changed since. We went back to, we go in pieces and parts and pieces and parts. But we took basically we divided our wing into, like you guys do. We basically said, okay, we're going to take half of this squadron and half of this squadron and half of this squadron. And I was supposed to go with them. And then at the last minute, we had a ecstasy ring on our base.
An ecstasy
ring.
Like the drug?
Drug.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And our dorms, I think it ended up being like, the numbers were crazy. I think we ended up having 7 airmen and like 5 or 6 civilians that were the OSI, our Office of Security Investigations. They had been doing an investigation, and they finally they had been going to raves and stuff, and they broke this investigation. And these were kids that were they were false, claiming to be OSI agents to get into clubs, and I mean, just stupid stuff. And they were all underage. They were underage drinking and doing drugs, and we had this kid. It was really sad. We had a young man that ended up dying because they would go up on the top of Pikes Peak and they would get high. Well, one night they were high and they were driving down, and coming down, he just drove off the end of the, he was in our squadron. In our actual squadron, I ended up with, I think I ended up with 5 of the kids, maybe 6, that were actually in my squadron. And so,
What did that take your squadron number down to, so I can get an idea of how big a squadron is?
oh, that it didn't touch, I mean, our numbers were, that was marginal.
Okay.
Because our squadron numbers were like, oh gosh, going back, I can't remember what the numbers were, but we had like 300 in our squadron, so it was like 6 people. It was airmen on top of that. So because at the time we had our maintenance squadron, or our maintenance element of it, and then we had the pilots, and we had like 30 pilots, and then we had our maintenance team that was down below. But what it did do was, so you have a lieutenant colonel who has G-series orders, the authority to levy out discipline, and then you have a lieutenant. And the lieutenant can give to these younger airmen, except after repeat offense, it starts building. And as it starts building, the level of discipline gets higher and higher. And as the level grows, the lieutenant's authority gets superseded. So, like I said, I was supposed to deploy with the unit, and our wing commander came in and said, yeah, no, she's staying because you've got this, and she's going to stay and take care of all of this. So the vice wing commander and I had to take care of all of this together. So every other day I was in his office, because within days it was outside of my authority. I could prep everything for him and everything, but I couldn't sign anything because these kids had gone back and forth so much that it was just like, it was crazy. It was crazy. But again, it was one of those where I learned a lot.
Okay, so just let me keep track of what we're doing here. We're at Hill Air Force Base.
Mm-hmm.
Unit is...
that was the 422nd. So I was with the 422nd Fighter Squadron.
And they were deployed
Mm-hmm.
to...
They ended up going to... they were over under Operation Southern Watch. They went into... where did they go? I want to say they went into Crete.
That's okay.
Either that or Turkey. I remember, it might have been Turkey, because I remember the night that they landed, my boss called me, and I remember everybody thought, civilian-wise, everybody thought Northern Watch and Southern Watch were dead. We weren't taking fire anymore. And he called me and he said, I'm going to tell you something, and you are not allowed to tell my wife this. And I started laughing. Uh-oh. He said, as I was coming in, I took live fire. He said, I'm telling you this because I got to tell somebody. You're not allowed to. Okay, boss. Are you okay? I'm okay. Okay. All right. It's good.
Okay. Did they come back, or did you ever join them?
No, they came back.
Okay.
It was, they were gone for 4 months, and then they came home.
All right. And by then, had you wrapped up the bad actors?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, good. All right. Are we on to our second duty station now?
Yeah.
How long were you at Hill?
I was at Hill for, 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I went from Hill, we went to RAF Mildenhall. I got over there in August of 2011. My family came shortly after me. I went over early. My son, my life is crazy. There's nothing. My son actually was born with craniosynostosis, so we had to do some crazy stuff. He had a cranial vault done before we left, where they actually took the cap off and piece part, put it back together, and so I went over early to make sure everything was good on the other side to receive them, and he's great now. Just so you know, he just graduated. He's actually leaving in less than 7 days to join the Marines.
Congratulations.
Very excited. So I went over in August, and then of course 9/11 happened. And I was in the middle of giving a spouses tour. I was a section commander and a mission support group with the 100th. And I was doing a protocol tour. Just basically it was a spouses DV, and I was walking, showing them some of the support stuff that we did on base for our spouses and local nationals and stuff like that. And I remember coming out, and one of my troops come running up and said, "Man, the tower's been hit." I just kept going, and I came back out. He said, "Man, they hit the second tower." And I remember looking at him going, "That's not funny. You need to stop. I'm busy. I'll talk to you when I'm done." And he said, "No, ma'am. You need to stop." And he turned, he said, "Look at the TV. They hit the towers." And I looked over, and I looked at the spouses, and I said, "We need to secure the building. You need to get off the base because they're going to lock it. Get home to your families." And then, because we went into Delta immediately.
Now, where are you stationed?
I was in the United Kingdom.
Oh.
And so I remember looking, I grabbed 3 of my troops, and I said, "Go to the commander, tell her I sent you, ask her for all the money she has, cash. Here's everything I have. Pool whatever you guys have, and I'll pay you back. Go over to the commissary and pull whatever you can, diapers and all of that, pull it all out now and secure it back here." Because I knew we were going to go down. And that's what we did, because we lost the commissary for 7 days. So we pulled it all back to the Force Support Center, or the Mission Support Squadron. And we were up for 32 hours doing,
Mission essential
doing
stuff.
Doing what we do.
Okay.
And it was surreal. But I will say, being there, the outpour of love for us from the Brits, I mean, I walked to and from, because we locked our bases, and driving on. I mean, we were literally we lived right off the base. And so it took me 15 minutes to walk onto base. It would take me half an hour to drive. But our gates were lined with stuffed animals and flowers, and I mean, just
Wow.
it was really touching. It was hard for my kids, though. It was hard for them to understand.
How old are they now?
Well, the baby is less than. He's a baby. I mean, he was a toddler. My oldest was 5, and my middle was 3, I think.
Was your husband also in the service?
No, he's a stay-at-home dad.
Okay. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
At this point.
Though it was very hard for him because we didn't have a TV, and so he was like,
"What are you talking about? What's going on?"
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, he knew from, because he was on base when it happened. So he knew because he'd seen it on base. But then once I got him off base, he couldn't get any of the information. And so it was hard for him because he just felt cut off. And then, of course, I couldn't tell him anything. So it was hard. But yeah, it's one of those, like everybody else, we all remember where we were. But we loved England. It was great.
How long were you there?
We were there for 3 years. We were supposed to be there for 4. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law developed leukemia. And so we ended up coming home on a humanitarian back here.
To Wright Pat,
Mm-hmm.
Air Force Base, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right, Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. I ended up, coming back and I went, I was assigned to the Air Force Institute of Technology.
AFIT?
AFIT.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do they do there?
Everybody wants to know that question.
Okay, what did you do there, if you can tell me?
Well, actually, AFIT's actually a pretty neat place. They're a college. So they do a lot of, they're a technical college. So they do like engineering and stuff like that. I actually worked in their civilian institution side. And so I was program manager specifically for the graduate programs and advanced degrees. So my first year I just did people who were going to be instructors at places like the Air Force, the Academy, the Air Force Academy out in Colorado Springs, or AFIT, instructors there. And so people who needed advanced degrees to do their job. I was responsible for helping them find a civilian institution, and when they were at the civilian institution, making sure that they stayed on program, maintained their military bearing, got the resources that they needed, and then got their annual evaluations and things like that, so that they, they didn't miss any of their gates for promotion or anything. My second year, I was actually in charge of the IDE program. So it's specifically those individuals that are majors and lieutenant colonels who are in the process of they're selected to go to school specifically for promotion. and they get to go to places like AFET or out to the Naval Postgraduate School. And again, it's just a different pool of, but I managed their program and made sure that they didn't do anything silly. So I got lucky. I got lucky. I did that for 2 years, and then I came up to the Air Force Materiel Command, and I got assigned to the A1 Directorate.
This is about 2005?
No, by that point it was actually, I came back to Wright Pat in 2004. So I was at AFET through 2005, 2006. I ended up at AFMC 2007. Then I deployed to Qatar in 2007-8.
What's Qatar? Or where is it?
Where is it?
Like in the world.
Now, see, you're going to ask a question that's going to make me sound silly because I think it's at the top of Saudi, isn't it?
Okay, so it's in the Middle East.
Yes.
We have a general idea. We're
Yes.
over in the Middle East now.
Right.
We've got a 2-year deployment?
No.
Okay.
No. That was just 6 months.
Okay.
We're Air Force. We don't go long.
I understand.
I went there to do the Air Force's forward. I was in charge of the personnel teams that went out all over the Middle East, and basically advised them on systems and processing evaluations and doing support at the forward bases. So I did that for 6 months.
Piece of cake?
Loved it.
Okay.
Absolutely loved it. It was hard. I mean, I loved it. It was hard being away from my family, but I am a big proponent of, I actually think deployments are so much easier than home station. You don't end up with a lot of the stress of dealing with, I love our families, and as a commander, we couldn't do it without our families. There's no question about that. We couldn't do it without our families, and our families take and sacrifice so much. But there's so much that comes with our families and gets brought into the workforce and our daily lives. When you're deployed, all of that gets stripped away. You job, you work out, you eat, and you job again.
The electric company isn't calling.
No.
The mortgage company isn't calling. It's go to work.
You know, which again, I mean, that's why we really, if we're good military people, we really need to be very thankful for our spouses, because we can do that when we deploy, because they're taking care of all of that.
That's who's getting the phone calls now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're deployed, I mean, that's why so many of us go and it's like, hey, I can do 2 days, so I'm going to get in shape, you know. Now, it's not to say that when we deploy, we don't, you know, because when I was deployed, I was working 12, 14-hour days, you know, but it's different. You don't mind doing 12, 14-hour days because your mindset is, I'm jobbing, you know, I'm jobbing. And it's for a purpose, and it's supporting the teams that are downrange, and it's very focus driven, and so it's very satisfying.
Great. So 6 months, good time. You come back to?
I came back to Mr. Peterson. I was still the A1 exec up at AFMC. I did that for another 6 months to a year, and then I got the call, and at that point I thought I was going to retire. Well, no, I didn't think I was going to retire. I called AFPC, Air Force Personnel Center, and said, look, this is what I want to do. I want to go to Turkey. I got a call from the center, and they said, hey, your number's up. You are going to get a short tour assignment. You got a choice. You can do it with your family, or you can do it by yourself. Talk to the family, and they all said, we're not doing this again. We want to stay here. You know, we're tired of moving all the time. We want to be around family and friends. And okay, this is going to suck, but okay. I chose to do military. You did not. So I went to Turkey, and so like Turkey. Doing it by myself. It was going to be 15 months. It was at a time when in the Air Force we were merging our services corps and our personnel corps career fields, and the A1 director had said, because I was his executive officer, he had sent me and said, you're going to be one of the first to be merged. So he had trained me to be both before, and then so he sent me to Turkey to help transition them, because they had both there, and they were going to convert to a force support squadron. They hired for both squadrons, so we were overrun with officers, and I was like, this is a 5-mile base and there's too many officers.
So we chiefs, not enough Indians.
Yeah. And I was missing my family.
How long had you been gone at this point?
6 months.
Okay.
Maybe 4 months. But it was hard. Not enough to do. Not enough to keep my mind active. So I called the center and said, I don't care where you got to send me. You deploy me. I was a major select at the time. And I said, you guys are wasting assets. I can sit here and I can do my school, but this is silly. I can do so much more for the Air Force somewhere else. And so I got lucky again.
You're the luckiest person I know.
I'm blessed.
Okay.
Either that or maybe it's just, I don't know. But I got a call back and they said, hey, there's a deputy force support squadron commander position in Kyrgyzstan, and it's yours if you want it. And I said, sign me up. I went to my boss and I said, look, I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes, but you've got all these officers, they need an officer. And he said, I got it. I understand what you're saying, and you're right. They were very supportive. And so they sent me. Went for 6 months. Again, loved it. Learned a lot. Got to work with Colonel Christopher Benz at the time, and Paul Kopecki. The transit center was a holding ground for, it's a joint transit, it is a true transit center. So it was a place where we purposely would bring troops through on their way home, specifically to kind of give them okay, catch your breath before you go back. And so Major Kopecki and I, we split shifts, and I did a lot of night shifts, and I walked the base and looked for those individuals who needed to talk. And there's a lot of moments in there that I will hold for the rest of my life. We got a lot of soldiers, sailors, Marines, whatever, airmen that are coming home broken. And what little we could do there to help, we tried. So,
You made a difference.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure of it. All right. We're doing big things, and now it's time to come home. Because you've been gone for a year and a half, sounds like. No, maybe 13, 14 months at this point?
Well, actually, then I went back to Turkey.
Oh.
I ended up doing another 5 months back in Turkey. And then I came home.
Okay, so you were gone the whole time then? Like
Right.
The whole 15
I ended up
months.
going back to Turkey. I did protocol in Turkey for 5 months.
Had they thinned out the Chiefs and the Indians yet?
A little bit.
Okay.
But it didn't really matter because I wasn't in the squadron anymore.
Okay.
I have a lot of background in international protocol, and they needed some help in that arena. Unfortunately, they had put a second lieutenant, and that's just something you don't do on a foreign base, especially someplace, I mean, you're prior, so you understand Turkey's a hot house. They put a female, fresh baby lieutenant in the protocol office that she didn't come from a military family. She had no experience with foreign relations. It ignited a lot of. So I came home to, what do we do with this? Well, I told you when I left, probably not your best choice. You need to put a captain because this is Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
So.
You come back, you fix it.
Yeah, it was, I love protocol anyways. Protocol's just fun because every day's different. So, yeah, I mean, had fun. Did my thing. Did some traveling. Enjoyed Turkey. Came home.
Back to Wright Pat, Air Force Base?
Well, I came back here to grab the family.
Okay.
When I was in Kyrgyzstan, I had received a phone call from AFPC, and they had told me that. So the idea was I was going to Turkey so that I could get a follow-on back to Wright Pat so that I could retire. Do a highlight back here, maybe at a debt or something, and then retire. I got a call while I was in Kyrgyzstan, and they said, "Yeah, we don't think that. No, we don't want you to do that." I said, "Well, but that's not what we had agreed on." And they said, "Well, needs of the Air Force and all." I said, "Okay, well, what's the Air Force need?" And they said, "Well, we think you should come down to AFPC." So I came back, and I ended up going down to AFPC and doing casualty. I was the chief of Air Force casualty for 2 years.
That had to be a difficult job.
It was. It was hard, but it was rewarding. It was a blessing. It was by and far one of the hardest assignments I've had. But one of the greatest honors I got in the Air Force.
And where were you located?
That was down at Randolph Air Force Base in Texas.
Okay.
So we did everything from making sure that families got to the bedside of seriously ill and injured. And in my tenure, we actually had a young man that we thought we were going to lose. He was in Germany, and so, which we don't typically fly families over to Germany, but we didn't think we could get him home. So we got his mom to bedside, full well expecting that it was just going to be mom show up, she hold his hand and watch him in, and say goodbye. She took his hand, and that young man came home. He came out of it.
That is so wonderful.
Yeah. I get those memories. So, now I have other ones. There's hard ones. I had to tell Mom one time. And I had to walk her through. Not mine. You can have anybody but mine. Those are hard. But I got the honor of protecting the dignity of our sisters and brothers. So for 2 years I got that. And that was a blessing.
Okay. Then what happens?
Then they sent me to school. They said, you go play for a year. You don't have to, we'll just send you to school. Air Force is great that way. So for a year, I went back to Maxwell. They paid for me to get a master's. It was a requirement for me to make rank. Or I guess I already had a master's, but it was a requirement for me to get ACSC to. So I went to Maxwell. Again, that networking thing that we do. Made a lot of really great friends, a lot of international partnerships and everything, and that was wonderful. Out of that, I got a call, and I thought, we thought, my family thought we were going to go back down to San Antonio. My oldest was like, all right, I'm going to go back to San Antonio. I'm going back to all my friends and everything. And then all of a sudden I got a call saying, yeah, we need your resume because you've got an interview with the chairman
Of?
the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Oh my.
Yeah, it wasn't actually with the chairman, but with his protocol officer. I was on the short list to be on his protocol team. Again, it was one of those, no, you've got the wrong person. I'm going to Texas. I told my daughter I'm going to Texas. No, you're not. I came home and I told the husband, and he said, well, just don't send your resume. Like, you know that this is the highest ranking member in the military. I don't think I get that option. I don't know. But I interviewed, and I interviewed with Linda Jacobs, and she's still the chairman's protocol officer. One of the most professional, amazing women that I've ever worked with. Learned so much from her, both personally, professionally. She's just a beautiful, graceful woman. So I count myself very, very, very lucky. Again, very lucky.
The theme of today.
Yeah. I honestly, it's funny because going back to when I was a captain, um, I don't know if you remember Dr. Roche. He was the Secretary of the Air Force back in 2000, so it would have been 2011, 12. But I did his highlight tour with him when he went around to say goodbye to everybody. And he sat down with me because I was a protocol officer in England at the time. And we had done his visit and everything, and it was the end of the night, and he looks at me and he says, "I want a drink." And it's like, okay. So we opened up the bar, and my wing commander came over, and our services commander came over, and we're all sitting down. "Lieutenant O.D., come sit by me." And he says, "What's your plan for the Air Force?" And I said, "Sir?" And he said, "What's your plan?" And I said, "Well, I said, I don't really have a plan." I said, I'm one of those people that I believe in the fact that there's a higher power, and I trust her, and I focus on what I need to do, the whole bloom where you're planted theme. I said, and she's taken care of me. She's loved me. So I've just kind of been blessed. He looked at me and said, "Well, that's stupid." Like, oh, okay. Get up and go now. Thanks. So, but.
All right. So, you're a lieutenant colonel now?
So yeah, I made lieutenant colonel. The chairman promoted me to lieutenant colonel. And then I got my command. So that was the last thing I wanted to do. So like I said, when we were in England, we came home because my husband's mom got leukemia, and we came back on a humanitarian. So I decided the last thing I wanted to do before I retired was I wanted to go back overseas, and I wanted command. So I got RAF Crown, which is 20 miles outside of Oxford, and I got command. I spent my last 2 years at the 422nd Air Base Squadron, which is the only difference between that and a force support squadron is I had an actual logistical element to it. But we supported 2,500 people in a kind of remote and isolated location. We had 3 restaurants, a hotel, did the library, all of the HR, it was a small little community. It was great. Loved it. And then when I came home, when I retired in December of 2016.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Feels a little fresh, right?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. What message would you like to leave for future generations who will hear this interview?
I think the biggest thing that I would say is it's really easy to get caught up in the politics focus on the job, focus on the mission, and focus on the people. And maybe in the reverse order, and actually mean that. So we say our number one resource is people. Sometimes we forget that. But at the end of the day, that's the truth. You know, I started this, and I've said a couple times, networking. Synergy is everything. You know, it isn't a zero-sum game. It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. And when we work together and we actually focus on synergy, and we focus on what we can do as a collective, there's so much more power. And it doesn't have to be about race, it doesn't have to be about gender, it doesn't have to be about any of the stupid stuff that tears us apart. It doesn't. At the end of the day, the core of who we are, we can do so much more.
That's a fantastic message. Is there anything else you feel like we haven't discussed that you want to talk about or that should be added to this interview?
As somebody who's a survivor of PTSD, that would be the only other thing that I would say is there's a lot of beliefs out there about what PTSD is and what survivors are. And before people make judgment on what it means to be a survivor of post-traumatic stress, get educated. Because I'm a survivor of PTSD. I don't use, I'm not crazy, I'm not gonna go blow anything up. I'm a relatively normal human being, just trying to survive. So get educated and give people the benefit of the doubt.
Wow. That concludes our interview. Thank you so much, Tamara. We appreciate your service and your time today.